This conference will now be recorded.
मैत्रीं भजत अखिलचेत्रीं मैत्रीं भजत अखिलचेत्रीम् आत्मवदेव परानपि पश्यत आत्मवदेव परानपि पश्यत युद्धं त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत युद्धं त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत त्यजत परेश क्रममाक्रमणम् त्यजत परेश क्रममाक्रमणम् मैत्रीं भजत अखिलचेत्रीं मैत्रीं भजत अखिलचेत्रीम्.
Thank you, Subhana. Thank you for the prayer. I call upon Nivedita Menon, finally a student Ashtangam, for the welcome address. Nivedita.
Namaste, ma'am.
Namaste, Nivedita. You are audible.
Okay. Honorable resource person, respected teachers, delegates, and my dear friends. Karma Siddhi 2020, a webinar series which seeks its importance more onto the mode of action of various procedures which we will be dealing in the clinics. Karmanascha Siddhau Sarvartha Siddhihi. After having the discussion about the actions of Videjanam, Nasyam, Vamanam, Vasti, and Svedanam successfully, we are here for the sixth session. Let me take this occasion to remind the efforts put forward by our Panchakarma department. I think you may all forgive us for the technical issues. Myself, Nivedita, final year student, taking it as a great privilege to welcome you all on behalf of Ashtangam family. First of all, let me welcome our honorable resource person, Dr. Praveen, Assistant Professor, Department of Panchakarma of PNNM Ayurveda College, Cheruturthi, for enlightening us on the topic Research Updates in Panchakarma. Welcome you, sir. Next, I welcome our dear teacher, Vaidya Sri Priya ma'am, HOD, Samhita Siddhanta Department, for the felicitation. I welcome our beloved teachers of Panchakarma, Vaidya Ramya Radhakrishnan ma'am, Vice Principal and HOD of Department of Panchakarma, and our dear Vaidya Sri Parvati ma'am, Assistant Professor of Department of Panchakarma. Then I welcome all the delegates and my dear friends for taking time out and being here today. Be safe and wishing you a nice time ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Nivedita. Thank you. As we all know, Ashtangam always works as a family together. So from Department of Samhita Siddhanta, HOD and Associate Professor, Dr. Sri Priya is here with us for the felicitation. And I'm happy to notice very coincidentally that Dr. Sri Priya is also an alumni of Nangelil Ayurveda College. And today's resource person, Dr. Praveen, is also an alumni of Nangelil Ayurveda College. So it was a mere coincidence. Anyway, I invite Dr. Sri Priya for the felicitation. Madam, please.
Okay. Am I audible?
You're audible, madam.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the sixth session of Karma Siddhi Expert Lecture Series conducted by Department of Panchakarma. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. You're audible.
Okay. This is the sixth session of Karma Siddhi Expert Lecture Series conducted by Department of Panchakarma of Ashtangam Ayurveda Vidyapeetham. Nowadays, research in Ayurveda has become a hot topic of discussion in our community. The need for Ayurvedic research is being highlighted than ever before in the present scenario of the pandemic. Also that there is a need for more and more young minds in the field of Ayurvedic research. Dr. Praveen, Assistant Professor in the Department of Panchakarma, is one such a scholar who has completed his PhD in Panchakarma from Jamnagar. Today, he will be discussing about the possibilities of research in Panchakarma and Ayurveda as a whole. I believe that this session will give more insight into the new dimensions of research methodologies in our sector. I wish him all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sri Priya, for your good words. So now we'll directly move on to the session. Dr. Praveen is, after his UG in Nangelil Ayurveda College, had his PG from Government Ayurveda College, Trivandrum. And he was working at Nangelil Ayurveda College again as assistant professor before he joined IPGTRA, Gujarat, Jamnagar, as PhD scholar. And he finished his PhD in the year 2019 December, and further he is now working as assistant professor in Department of Panchakarma, Cherudurti, an enthusiast in the field of Ayurveda, and the son of a great physician again, Dr. Shashidharan sir. We are very happy to have Praveen with us, and I'm sure as a beginner into a great career further as a teacher, Dr. Praveen will definitely shine in his own way. So I invite with all love, respect, okay, Praveen, for the session. Okay, so Praveen, I request you to on the video for a few moments so that everyone can see you, and then off if there is a range issue. Okay.
Yes, madam, am I audible?
You're audible, Praveen.
Yes, I think I have switched on my video also.
Yeah, you're seen. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would like to thank Dr. Ramya for inviting me for this very important session, for this seminar series going in Ashtangam Ayurveda College, and I greet each and every faculty of Ashtangam Ayurveda College and any other faculty who is also attending this particular meeting. And I welcome you all the students and everybody to this particular presentation. And this particular presentation is about, shall I go on with the presentation or should I?
Yeah. If there is a range issue, you can off the video. You can go on with the presentation. Okay.
Yeah, I think that I'll just switch off my video because that will be easy, so that there will not be any range issues.
Yeah, definitely. You can switch off. Okay, Praveen, continue. Thank you.
Yeah. So am I audible? Hello?
You're audible.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So this is a topic which I have in my hand, research updates in Panchakarma. When I got this topic for presentation, research updates regarding mode of action in Panchakarma, that was exactly the topic is about. So while speaking about research in, especially on this field of mode of action of Panchakarma, not much researches are being done, or it has just started to understand the mode of action of different Panchakarma procedures. So very few informations are there regarding any updates regarding mode of action. So I will just gather whatever knowledge I have so that I can share it with you. And we know, I'll move to the next slide. I think the slide is not. Is a next slide available? Hello.
The next slide is not moving on. It's not seen.
It's not seen.
Yeah, not seen now.
I'm not sure whether there is any technical issues is there. Yeah, I think it is visible now, right? No?
Yeah, now it's visible.
Yeah, right. So we'll begin with what is research. So research is actually a careful or diligent search, and it is actually, we search in a systematic manner. We research for a systematic manner and in an organized method to find answers to certain questions. Actually, it is like we actually find out a particular research problem. We identify a topic, we identify an area where the research should be done, and then we design a particular methodology for doing that research, and then we carry out the project or we do the study, and then we find out what all things are there what are the findings we got after conducting the research, and then we analyze it, and then we publish it. That is the most important part. We publish the research part, then only it become considered as a research. If you don't publish a particular research, then it cannot be considered as a research study. So especially in this particular presentation, I have taken information from different research papers which are authentically published in renowned journals like PubMed, and also I am also trying to incorporate certain studies which were also done in IPGT and RA. So this is a research cycle which we have, the particular method of doing the research, the method which I told. This is a way by which different research is being done in particular in Ayurveda. So while speaking about research in Ayurveda, we should have a question like, is research really required in Ayurveda? Some may say that research is not required in Ayurveda because Ayurveda is beyond research. Ayurveda is Anadi, Ayurveda is Ananda. You don't require research in Ayurveda. Is it true? We are not sure about that. Another group of people at the present moment, some people may not be sure about that. Another group of people may say that yes, we require research. We need to do research in Ayurveda for its better understanding. That is another group of people. So different, the present method of research is not suitable for Ayurveda. That is another Vadamarga present in different group of people. So some people consider Ayurveda should be researched properly in order to understand its mode of action, in order to understand its revalidation and all. So that is one part. And there may be different questions regarding Ayurveda, like is Ayurveda an empirical science? Or is it a medicine which is being developed because of some, Brahma Smritva Ayurveda? So it has a divine origin. So some people consider Ayurveda to be of divine origin. Some people consider Ayurveda to be of empirical type. And some people consider Ayurveda to be a belief system. Like some people are very religious about Ayurveda, that Charaka and Susruta has said it like this, so it is like this. We should not question them. Should we be like that, or should we question acharyas? Like, should we be critical about learning different aspects of Ayurveda? These are the different questions which may come into our mind. And regarding the types of researches also, there are different questions which may come to our mind, like is randomized control trials is possible in Ayurveda? Is it valid in Ayurveda? Is it feasible in Ayurveda? How is the conclusions which we get by doing randomized control trials good in Ayurveda? So such questions are there, and recently there was a seminar in IPGT involving WHO. They had discussions regarding what type of research should be done in Ayurveda. So actually, the pyramid of research, like RCT is a gold standard. We have the case studies, the case series, and all in the lower portion. I think most of you must have learned research methodology. So I think so it is there in the syllabus. So most of you must be understanding. If there is any issues, you may later ask me. So case series or case studies are considered in the lowest part of research pyramid, and also observation studies are there. So these things come in the lowest part of research hierarchy. And then as we go up, we come to the RCTs, and then above that there is meta-analysis. So different research methodologies are available. But certain people argue that these modern research methodologies are only viable for modern research, modern scientific research. They are not conducive to Ayurvedic research. This is a group of people may argue like that. So different questions are there. So like when we consider treating a patient, we consider so many things like Dushyam, Desham, Belam, Galam, Malayalam, Prakriti, Vaya, Sattam, Satmyam. So how is it possible to include all these things in randomized control trials? Because in randomized control trials, you randomly assign a patient to different treatment methodologies. So there is a questions regarding what type of research is possible. In WHO, they have put forward black box design in doing research in Ayurveda, or there is a circle of evidence. That is the newest thing which has arrived. Circle of evidence is that you must consider everything. Like there is no hierarchy, there is no pyramid in research. There is only a cycle only. You must consider case studies, you must consider case series, you must consider observation studies, you must consider experimental studies with equal importance, and then come with a particular conclusion. So that is what circle of evidence is being indicating. So different questions are being arising regarding doing research in Ayurveda. And while speaking about Panchakarma also, different questions comes to our mind. What happens while we do Panchakarma? It is still a mystery. What it does do? Is it detoxification? Is it purification? Is it cleansing? Different questions are coming to our mind. And what are the measurable outcomes while we do Panchakarma, while we do Vamana Karma, or while we do Virechana Karma, while we do Basti? What are the different measurable outcomes? Are there any measurable outcomes? What are the endpoint which we should attain while doing different Panchakarma procedures. These are the different things which come to our mind while doing research in Panchakarma. And this is a particular paper which came, a particular paper which came in Harvard Medical School, the dubious practice of detoxification. So people, when we are not able to explain like what is happening by doing Panchakarma procedures, coming to the point, like while we are trying to understand the mode of action of Panchakarma procedures, we must be able to correctly explain what is happening to the body, what is happening to the human body, what is happening to the medicine which we do, what is happening while we do a particular procedure, what is the difference between Vamanam and Virejanam. When we are not able to clearly explain the mode of action, then it becomes a dubious practice. So that is what we should be able to be concentrating upon while we do research in Ayurveda and especially in Panchakarma. So how do we understand? The mode of action of Panchakarma? That is a particular thing, and I think the answer to that we can find it in Charaka Samhita. And ya buddhi bahukarana yoga bahukaranopapattihi tajjan bhavan pashyati karanopapattiya aviඥāta tattvan arthan jnāpayati ityartah. It is simple that if we know certain things we don't know. Certain things we don't know about, especially about Panchakarma procedure, the mode of action of Panchakarma procedures. We don't know how it acts. Of course, we do have the explanations given by the acharyas. We know the explanations given by Charaka. We know the explanations given by Susruta and all, Vagbhata and all. So, but we are not able to clearly understand in the present science what is happening while we do a particular Panchakarma procedure. So what I would like to say here is that if we have a thing which is not particularly understood, we can use certain things which we already know in order to understand which is not known. That is what this particular sloga indicates. Say there is the formation of fire, then there is a particular wood is, in Arani, which we call in Malayalam, there is a particular wood which is kept in the ground, and another wood is used to rub that particular wood, and then we produce a particular fire. So when we know about different thing, like a wood which is kept below is known as matya, and a particular wood which is used to rub on it is known as Mandhana. And who does it? We do it, and we are known as Mandhaka. When we have the particular knowledge about Matya, Mandhana, and Mandhaka, we will be able to understand how a fire is produced. The similar mechanism we should be using to understand the mode of action of particular Panchakarma procedures. So by chance, I also remember that today is actually Charaka Jayanti. And Charaka is one of the most important researcher in Ayurveda. One of the biggest researcher and clinician in Ayurveda is actually Charaka. So Charaka has very beautifully researched so many things. In his time period, he had done so many researches according to the available tools and according to the available experimental lab which was available to him, which is of course the nature. Like when we take the Dashavida Pariksha Bhavas, this Karana, Karyoni, Karyam, etc., we can understand that actually research is being hidden in that. While we take the case of Karana is a cause. And in modern way, while we say it is a researcher, the Karana is instrument, and it is actually the investigational products. The Karyoni is the source of action, and which is actually a research problem. Karyam is actually Dhatu Satmikriya, which is actually the aims and objectives of the purpose of study. Karyaphalam is Sukha Prapti, which is actually expected outcomes, which is primary and secondary and all. So each and every other thing we can find that it was very systematically researched by our Acharya, especially Charaka Samhita. So we do have our answer to the questions in our textbooks also. So again, then coming to the research, coming to the present topic. This is a particular thing which was developed in Europe, where they have this particular portable Shirodhara machine where you can pack it in your bags, you can take it anywhere, and then you can use it for yourself. You don't require a paricharaka, you don't require a doctor for doing it. So is this actually research? We cannot exactly say. This is not exactly a research which we have over here. Because why I showed this particular picture is that, especially while we speak about Panchakarma, especially while we speak about Ayurveda, Panchakarma is a thing which strikes to the mind of people all around the world. And while we speak about Panchakarma, the first thing which comes to mind is about Shirodhara. Shirodhara is very famous. But actually, Shirodhara is not a Panchakarma procedure. It is, there is, while speaking about this, I remember that a term called Keraliya Panchakarma. Keraliya Panchakarma is nothing but a misnomer. There is nothing like Keraliya Panchakarma. But actually, there is a person called Aryavedan Raghunath Iyer. He had actually quoted that Murda Sega Kaya Sega Pindasved Annalevanam Shirolebas Pancha Kerale Pradhita Kriya. So Murdha Sega, Kaya Sega, Pindasved Annalevanam, Shirolebam. So these things may be considered as Keraliya Panchakarma. That is what the closest reference which we have regarding Keraliya Panchakarma. So actually the real Panchakarma is actually Vamana Virajanam, which we already study in the classical textbooks. But according to the people, according to common man or layman, what they understand by Panchakarma procedures, this Abhyangam, this Urichil, Abhyangam they understand, this Shirodhara they understand. So simple things actually they consider as Panchakarma, but which is actually not so correct. But while searching for certain papers regarding the mode of action of different Panchakarma procedures, accidentally came upon this particular paper, which was done by Dr. K. Uebaba, which was done in Japan actually. What he did was that he did a study with a particular healing robot. He did two groups of people over there. One group of people, they did this Shirodhara with a particular manual technique, which we traditionally do. They did the study in a traditional method. And the other group of people, they did the study with a particular healing robot. And what he found out was that this method of Shirodhara was most skillful healing technique that manipulates cerebral circulation, cerebral function, and the state of consciousness. And it may lead to a particular knowledge called modern brain research and connecting modern brain research and consciousness. But the thing is that especially what he did was interesting to see. He did certain things like standardization of Shirodhara. What he did was that he found out that the amount of weight of oil which was falling on the forehead was 16 grams at the forehead, and the flow of the oil through the Dhara Patra was actually 2.3 liters per minute. So this is what he found out while he was doing this particular Shirodhara with human participants. So he converted this particular oil weight and this particular flow of oil into a machine, and he did that particular study. And what he found was that the heart rate decreased significantly in just 5 minutes while doing the Shirodhara, while you do with the robot, while you do with the particular machine. And also the carbon dioxide excretion and tidal volume also decreased while you do with this robot as compared to the human being, human paricharaka. Also the cardiac activity was suppressed while you do with this particular Shirodhara machine. And another interesting thing, other findings which came was that Shirodhara induced bradycardia, means it lowered the heart rate, it lowered the tidal volume, and it increased the alpha and theta waves. Alpha and theta waves are actually which shows that the brain is in a particular relaxed manner. It is anxiolytic action which is there in the brain. And of course, the patient was in a particular state of meditation. That is what he had actually found out. And another interesting thing was that he recorded the changes which was happening in the technicians. The technicians, what he saw was that the Shirodhara showed signs of stressful conditions. The people who did the Shirodhara, the Paricharaka, was under great stress while he did that particular Shirodhara procedure. So what he suggested was that instead of doing with Paricharaka, why don't you do with particular machine, so that you will be getting a particular oil weight that is 16 grams in the forehead, and the flow of oil will be very much controlled at 2.3 liters per minute. So that is what which he suggested. Why don't you use like that? I'm not saying that he is exactly correct, but this thing actually was a particular research interest which he did on the aspect of Shirodhara. So while we consider the Shirodhara vessel, it is being said that it should be of 3 prastham, and the wick which comes out of the Shirodhara pot, it should be 6 angulam, and it should be at a height of 4 angulam according to Dhara Kalpam, and it should be at 2 angulam according to the Shirasegadi Vidhi. So different opinions are there, but we don't know what happens if you do it at a height of 4 angulam, or what happens if you do it at a height of 2 angulam. We say that there are opinions like this, but still we are not understanding what is the difference while we do in a different method. So maybe this is actually a research point which one can do in the future regarding what will happen while we do Shirodhara procedures in different methods. So while you see the alpha and theta waves, these are actually very the waves of the brain which are found in EEG, electroencephalography. So this indicates that patient is very much relaxed and the mind is very much in control. And while you see the Falasruti of Shirodhara, it is being said it is Stairyam Vakmanaso, Sharira Balamabi, Ahara Gangsha Dhridi, Madhuryam Vajasaha. So Stairyam Vakmanasa, it gives stability to the mind. Dhridi, it gives determination. Madhuryam Vajasaha, the speech of the patient will be very much in a calm state. So while you understand this particular study with the Falasruti of the Tailadhara, you can understand that it is very much matching. So those are some of the things which actually which increases the curiosity of Ayurvedic people. And actually the type of mechanism of action which V. Baba explained was that there is a tactile stimulation occurring to the skin or hair follicles innervated by the first branch of trigeminal nerves, that is ophthalmic nerve and all. And this impulse will be transmitted to the thalamus through the principal nucleus, and it will be forwarded to the cerebral cortex and maybe to the limbic system. So this is the main method of action which will be occurring while you do Shirodhara procedure. This is what Dr. V. Baba had to say about Shirodhara procedures. But there were a couple of research studies conducted in India. I think it was not officially published, I think. One is that they did Shirodhara in a particular oscillatory method, and another method was that they did a steady Shirodhara. While you do Shirodhara, it is being said that you must oscillate the Shirodhara patra, but some people did a particular comparative study, and it was being found that the oscillatory method is a little bit better. Actually, while you see the Shirasegadi Vidhi, if Shirasegadi Vidhi, there is a reference like Dharaya Padnat Reva Kagaro Vayatha Bhavit. The shape of the falling of oil on the forehead should be in the shape of Ra or Ka. Ra or Ka is the Malayalam Ra or Malayalam Ka, which is actually a curved letter. So it should be on an oscillatory manner while we understand its interpretation. So that is better for getting a particular benefit while you do the Shirodhara procedure. So actually, the oscillatory method was found to be more effective than doing the steady flow method of Shirodhara. So while we see the method of action of different Murdha Tailas also, you can find in modern medicine, they have this concept of transcranial drug delivery mechanism. Transcranial drug delivery mechanism is brain targeted delivery of certain particular medicines. So two studies which I came across. One is that they applied oil on rats. Yes, rats. They applied oil on rats, and this particular oil was mixed with methadone. Methadone is something which reduces the pain sensation. So this particular oil was applied on the head of the rats, and what they found was that it was found to be effective in reducing the pain of the rats. It had some analgesic opioid effects. And in another study, what they did was that they took a particular oil, and mostly in both the studies they took sesame oil, and in the second study they added a particular medicine called diazepam, which actually induces sleep. So this was applied in particular volunteers, and it was seen that it was successful in reducing the sleep latency. Sleep latency reduction means the patient can go to sleep very easily. So diazepam actually had that particular effect when it was applied on the scalp when mixed with oils, and it was seen that it produced a particular anxiolytic effect also on the participants. So this was which increased the thing that while you apply oil or while you apply different medicines on the scalp, it may be absorbing through the scalp. So while you see the anatomy of the scalp section, you can see that there is a particular vein called emissary veins. These emissary veins are actually something which is connected to the loose areolar tissue of the scalp. So anything which gets into the loose areolar tissue, it gets transported by the emissary veins from the top to the cranial cavity. So the modern medicine, they call this as the dangerous area of the scalp. So if there is any infection which is occurring in this particular loose areolar tissue, these infections can transfer from the scalp through the emissary vein and into the brain. So they call it as a dangerous area of the scalp. And maybe this is also a mechanism by which while we do different applications in Murda Taila, the action may be through the emissary veins. It has the potential to transfer the medicines, the absorption of medicine may be happening through this particular emissary veins. So again, coming to the different concept called Abhyanga. While we say Abhyanga, we do have a particular question: can oils penetrate the skin? Like oil, we know that stratum corneum is the layer in the skin which is forming a formidable barrier and prevents almost most of the things which comes in contact with the skin. So while you apply oils, many people have asked, while you apply oils, does this oil get absorbed in the skin? Or while you apply different types of procedures like Upanaha and all, is it getting absorbed? Is it having any particular action while you do it in particular method like massage and Abhyanga and all? So what is happening while you do this? Again, different studies were conducted where they showed that this is actually a study which was done by modern medicine doctors, not exactly Ayurvedic people. And in that it is being shown that certain essential fatty acids like safflower oil or coconut oil, and when they are massaged on the babies, the while you apply it on the babies and while you do the massage and then you assess the triglyceride values of the babies, it is found to be increased compared to the babies for whom oil was not applied. And the actually the fatty acid profiles showed that essential fatty acids, especially the linoleic and arachidonic acid in safflower oil group, was found to be increased when compared with that of babies for whom this Abhyanga was not done. So this is a particular thing which indicates that there is some sort of absorption happening while you do a particular massage with oil. This is a part regarding babies and absorption of massage. Like in Kerala, we do have this particular method of applying oil on the babies with particular coconut oil, like Urukku Velichenna, where the milk of the coconut is removed and it is heated, and the oil which comes out, it is used for Abhyanga. It is used for massage for children. It is found to be very effective for the normal growth of the babies. Then again, another particular study which came was the concept of penetration enhancers. The concept of penetration enhancers for transdermal drug delivery. Here also, a study was conducted where natural oils were used, and dihydroquercetin was mixed in that, and it was applied over the in vivo and ex vivo skin, human ex vivo skin, and it was found out that while you apply oil mixed with this particular chemical, this particular chemical was found to be present in the skin, and it was found to be penetrated into the skin also. So oils, this is actually a modern medicine study. So what they say is that oils can act as penetration enhancers for particular transdermal delivery of particular medicines. And the particular the method of action which they had said is that while certain oils like soybean oil or olive oil, they have fatty acids containing C18 chain, and they have at least a double bond. They have the potential to form a king structure. King structure is a particular structure where it can change the they can change the order of skin lipids, and it may be able to have the transfer of materials from the outside skin to the inside of the skin. So that is what the postulate which they had put forward. And another study shows that while you mix diclofenac with fatty acids, there also they found that it was a major method by which this particular chemical can be penetrated into the human body. So these are the different possibilities while we speak. These are the different possibilities when somebody asks that, what do you say when you say that while you do Abhyanga, does the oil get absorbed into the skin? Actually, we Ayurvedic people haven't done studies regarding that, but some modern people have done some study, and they have this particular findings. So maybe the research potential which we have is to find out what happens while you apply Ayurvedic oils. What do you mean, or what are the interpretations? What are the meaning while you apply oil which is having Shita Guna? What happens while you apply oil which is having Ushna Guna? So is it absorption? Is it exactly absorption, or is it that the nerve endings are being stimulated while you do particular massage technique? So certain studies more should be done in order to explain what is the mode of action of Abhyanga while you do with oils. And then coming to the aspect of Udvartana. Udvartanam is, you know, what is Udvartanam? Udvartana Kavaharam Vedasa Pravelayanam Divanam Prasadagaram Param. So, while you go through the concept of microderma aberration, what they do is that they remove the top layer of the skin. They remove the top layer of the skin, and it is a minimally invasive procedure. And what happens is that the skin overall tone and texture increases, and it can improve the appearance of sun damage, wrinkles, etc. So it gives a more youthful skin. So that is what happens to the microderma aberration. While you see the guna of Udvartana, Udvartanam Kabaharam, that it removes the particular kabha in the skin, and Medasa Pravelayanam Strigaranamanganam Tok Prasadagaram Param. It increases the prasada of the skin. And while you read this with microderma aberration, it should ring some bells in our minds. And especially there is a technique called derma aberration in transdermal drug delivery mechanism, where what they do is that they remove a particular amount of top portion of the skin, and then they apply particular medicines on top of the skin, so the medicines are being absorbed into the body. So maybe while we say is that you should do rukshanam before you do snehana or snehana application, or when you do udvartanam before you do abhyanga, maybe this is what is happening. Maybe a particular small layer of skin is being removed, that's kabaharam. Then when you apply the sneha on top of that, that particular medicine, that particular potency of the medicine is being able to be absorbed into the skin. That may be a possibility. Then coming to the snehapana, what is happening while you do a snehapana procedure? That is actually a puzzle. Actually, what happens while you do snehapana procedure? People say that the cells of the body become saturated with fats, or the fatty material then gets the cells of the body get saturated, and the dosha comes out of the cells, comes out of the dhadus, and it comes to the srotas, and then we do the shodhana procedure. So is this what is happening while you do snehapana? Actually, we have the explanations with modern methods, with the Ayurvedic methods. Charaga and Vagbhat has explained what happens while you do snehapana. But while speaking on the modern science, or another viewpoint is that while you give the patient snehana, or while you give the patient ghee or oil for drinking, what happens is that a state of ketogenesis develops in the body. Ketogenesis means it is a high fat diet and low carbohydrate diet. So what happens in this ketogenic condition is that like ketogenic diet, it is shown to be having neuroprotective effect. It burns fat, and you know, in patients who are having obesity, we used to do shodhana procedures for them. We used to do vamana for them. We used to do virechana for them. So what happens is that while you do snehapana, while you observe the body weight of the patient initially before planning of the treatment, and after the snehapana, the patient may lose some weight. It may be because of this ketogenic diet which we are giving, ketogenic diet in the form of snehapana or ghee or oil drinking for the patient. So this particular idea is very much working in the sense that while we see the body weight of the patient initially, and then after giving ketogenic diet, it increases the fat burning of the patient, and then after snehapana, for some patients the weight decreases, and after the shodhana procedure, even more the weight decreases. So this may be one of the possibility occurring in the patient. And while you see this ketogenic condition which is happening in the body for a patient who is having diabetes mellitus, or patient who are starving, or patient who are doing too much of exercise, for such patients they already have a ketogenic situation in their body. So while you see the contraindication of snehana, diabetic patients are supposed to do snehana, and patients who are durbala, for that patients also you're not supposed to give snehana. So maybe a ketogenic condition is already there in the body, so you're not supposed to give more, you're not supposed to force the body to more ketogenesis while you give Snehapana procedure. So that is why, that may be the reason why for certain patients Snehapana is being contraindicated. This is actually one of the possibility. No research has been done regarding this, but I am just saying one of the possibilities what happens when you do Snehapana. And this is actually a conceptual like the Madhura Bhaga Avastha, Amala Bhaga Avastha, and Kadu Avastha Bhaga of different snehas. We already know. I'm not going into the theoretical aspect. I'm trying to explain possible studies. So yeah, so some other research studies are also done regarding Snehapana. This was done by Ayurvedic people. So what they found was that some people may have a doubt. So at least some doctors, some of the patients may have asked some doctors that why do you take Snehapana, why do you take ghee, or why do you take oil? Shouldn't the lipid profile get increased? Shouldn't the cholesterol get increased? That should be harmful to me. Some people may have asked. So this was a study which was done. These some of the 1, 2, 3, 4 studies were done, which shows that actually no such thing actually occurs while you do Snehapana with the Grida or while you do Snehapana with Taila. The first study where it shows that there is no significant change in the lipid profile post oral ingestion of lipids. And in the second study, it shows that there is a decrease in lipid levels while you do Snehapana. Third study shows that there is significant reduction occurred in triglycerides. And in the fourth study, it shows that triglycerides and VLDL levels were increased significantly within normal range. Okay, and this increase was come back to normal after the Shodhana procedures. So there is no doubt that there is nothing to worry that while you do the Snehapana procedures, the lipid profile will be under control, and there is no need to worry about that. Only thing is that you must not do Snehapana in people who are contraindicated for that. That is the only thing which we must keep in our mind. And this is something, and regarding speaking about the researchers in mode of action, this was something which I came to notice and which I thought that I should be sharing with you all. This is about assessment of Agni. Assessment of Agni in the sense that while you give Snehapana or while you give Sneha to the patient, it is said that the Agni gets increased. So this is a particular formula like Agni Bala index, finding the Agni Bala index, where we divide the test dose by the given dose into multiplied by time taken to digest. So suppose on the first day you give 30 ml, and so the given dose is also 30 ml. Test dose by given dose, 30 by 30. It takes 2 hours for digestion, so it takes 2. The answer is 2. The second day you give 60 ml, so 30 by 60 into 2, which is equal to 1. On the third day you give 120 ml, 30 by 120 into 3, which is equal to 0.75. So you see that the Agni Bala index is getting decreased each day. While the Agni Bala index is decreasing, we can understand that Agni Bala is increasing. So it is a proper way that we can understand that while you're doing the Snehapana, the Agni is being increased and you're doing the correct method of increasing of the Sneha to the patient. If you find that the Agni Bala index is not decreasing, but if it is increasing, then you must understand that the Agni is not much increased and you must be careful while you increase the Snehapana dose. So one thing which I thought that I should be sharing with you all. So then coming to the Svedana aspect, again, speaking of Svedana, we know that we apply Svedana in different methods. We apply Svedana by Pinda Sveda, we apply Svedana by Valuga Sveda, we apply Svedana by Dhara, we apply Svedana by Kashaya Dhara and all. So what is the difference while you apply Svedana by different methods? You know, while we apply Svedana by different methods, one thing which come to our mind is something which we learned in physics, like radiation, conduction, and convection. Radiation is something which occurs while you are applying, as you say, while you're applying infrared radiation in IR. While you're applying heat by IR, it is actually a radiation method of applying heat. So while you are doing Svedana by different methods like Jentaka Svedam, it is actually a radiation method. And conduction is you have a touch, you touch the body with a particular hot object. That is actually conduction method. So conduction, while you do different Svedas, Pinda Svedas, like different electrices, you do Shashtika Pinda Svedam and all, this particular heat is being transported from this particular kidney, from this particular bolus into the body. And then you have this convectional application of heat. Convection application of heat is where you do Svedana with different oils, or you do Svedana with the different kashayas. So what happens is that you heat the oil or you heat the kashayas and then you pour it on the body of the patient. So the liquid flows on the body. That is convectional application of heat. So there is physically, not physically, while you speak it in the sense of physics, this is a difference in application of heat by different methods. So one thing which I would like to ask is that while you do PDChill, PDChill is a particular Kerala treatment of method. While you heat the oil and then you you dip a particular cotton in the oil and then you squeeze it with your hand over the body of the patient. That is the method by which you do PDChill. And in Kashaya Dhara, you heat the Kashaya and then you take a particular vessel called Kindi, which we call in Malayalam. You take the Kashaya in that particular vessel and then you pour it over the body of the patient. Why is it that why is that hand is being used in oil and Kindi is being used in Kashaya? Such questions may have come to the mind of some people, or vice versa. Why couldn't you use cotton for doing dhara with Kashaya? That is also a question which may come sometimes. So what is the rationale behind it? See, the answer which I think, the detection which I think is that while you're doing PDChill, you're actually the Paricharak is actually touching the oil. He knows the heat of the oil. So the oil is not too much hot. If it is too much hot, it can burn the patient. The heat with the oil, if you get burned by the oil, then it is very difficult the patient will be getting too much of pain. So actually when you are heating the oil and the Paricharaka is touching the oil and then doing the dhara, then what happens is that the oil heat is being controlled. There is a sense like what is the temperature of the oil. If you do it, the Kashaya dhara doesn't have such problem because it doesn't boil as much as oil. The water doesn't boil much as oil. So that may be the simple reason why such things are being done. So that is, I just went somewhere else while speaking about Svedana, while beginning with Svedana. Coming back to the slides, while you see the hemodynamic effects of Sarvanga Svedana, we know that what happens while you do a Svedana, that is what a study was being done. And in two group of patients, in normohypertensive and hypertensive patient, normotensive patient and hypertensive patient. So what they found out was that in the case of Svedana was that there was a significant rise in pulse rate, systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, and which indicated increased cardiac output and ejection fractions while you do this particular Svedana procedure. And this increase was actually transient. It was temporary, and it came back to normal just 5 minutes after completion of the Svedana procedure. That was one thing which they found out. And they also found out that when you do the Svedana procedure, there will be an increase of cutaneous vascular conductance. More blood will be coming to the vasculature of the cutaneous surfaces, and there will be less blood circulation into the splanchnic circulation. Okay, so that is what the finding was that, and there will be a corresponding decrease of conductance at non-cutaneous beds. Like I said, in the splanchnic area and organ level, there will be a decrease of flow of blood, and there will be increase of flow of blood in the cutaneous surfaces, and also there will be an increase of cardiac output. And there will be a reduction in the central venous pressure almost immediately with the onset of passive heating. So this particular Svedana procedure, while this was a particular study which was done in Peti Sveda, that is what we call in North India, or that particular, while you do Svedana in a box. So this Svedana procedure increased the splanchnic resistance. So while you see it in a pictorial manner, you can see that in the lower portion, what you can see is that what happens in normal state. In the upper portion, the blue dots shows that what happens when Svedana is being done. You can see the drastic change in the circulation while you do the Svedana procedures. And especially you can see the upper right portion, you can see there is 56 to 64% increase of blood flow to the skin and cutaneous areas. And you can see how the different circulation of blood to different internal organs are being decreased while you do the Svedana procedures. So during the whole body, we call it as heat stress. This is actually a study upon heat stress. So what they found was that while you apply heat stress to the body and the blood flow, the cardiac output increases from 5 to 12.5 liters per minute. There is almost 2.5 fold increase in blood flow is happening. So this is what is happening while you do Svedana procedures. So the other findings which happens was that while you see acharyas, while you see the acharyas, how he had described different positions while during different Svedana procedures is that you must lie down while you do Svedana. That is what acharya has been saying in different procedures of doing Svedana procedures. So what the findings of this particular study was that supine lying style Sarvanga Svedana is apt to be safer compared to sitting style, because the blood circulation is being happening more to the cutaneous areas than to the splanchnic area. So it gives more comfort to the patient while he is lying down. Also, it is being said that after 5 minutes of stopping the Svedana, the blood comes back to the normal state. The cardiac output comes back to the normal state. So at least for the 5 minutes after completion of the Svedana procedure, the patient should lie down as it is. And patients who are having hemodynamic problems, function problems, like people who are having congestive heart disease, persons who are having bundle branch block, or people who are having anemia or myocardial infarction, such people should be avoided from doing different Svedana procedures, because they cannot cope up with this hemodynamic effects of Svedana procedures. So while you see in modern sense also, people who are having Pandu, Kushtam or Vadarektam, they may be having some sort of hemodynamic problems. So such people, maybe we must be careful while doing Svedana to such people. Then again, coming to the sloga, everybody knows about this particular sloga. Shushkanya bhekashtani sneha svedobhavadane namyandi yadhanyayam kim punarjivanti nara. So while you try to bend a particular dry stick, it is not possible, it breaks down. So when you apply oil and when you heat the oil, when you heat this particular stick, we are able to bend the stick in a particular fashion. So this is what we study while we study the effect of Snehan and Svedana on the body. So if this happens on dry stick, what to speak about human body? That is what they say. So while we see the hemodynamic effect of Svedana, you can find that while you do the Svedana procedure of 7 days, what they found was that sustainable decrease in peripheral resistance was found, and there is increased vascular flexibility. You read it with Shushkanya bhekashtani sneha svedobhavadane namyandi yadhanyayam. So the flexibility or the elasticity of the vascular structure is being increased, and the blood flows more freely through the blood vessels, and it decreases the blood pressure. So many good effects are there while you do Svedana procedures. So this is a way by which we understand this particular sloga. And coming to the Vamana procedure, different studies were being conducted, and one of the study was that understanding the electrolytes and pH analysis by blood gas analysis. So what they found was that serum electrolyte levels in comparison to pre-Vamana and post-Vamana status revealed that serum sodium concentration is increased by 1.97%, and the same is decreased by 3.08% before Payapan. So that is not much important, because different changes are being seen in the electrolytes of the body, but it is within normal limits. That is one thing which we have observed in Vamana procedure. So it is completely safe while you do the Vamana procedure, but you must see again the indication and contraindication of Vamana procedure. That is one thing. But another point which I'd like to say is the method by which the Vamana was being assessed by using the pH scale. The pH, while we give the medicine to the patient and the patient starts vomiting, and then we record the pH of the patient. So in the initial stages, it was actually acidic in nature. It is acidic in the nature because of the presence of acid, because of the different acid production in the acid secretions of the stomach, and the stimulation of the gastric mucosa leads to the production of acid. So while you see the first vomitus is coming out and you see the pH of that, it is actually acidic in nature. Then after some time, because of the constant irritation of the gastric layer, there will be production of mucous bicarbonate layer. Mucous bicarbonate layer, it tries to protect the stomach lining, and it will become a little bit alkaline in nature. And again, you're giving medicine for vomiting, you're giving HT Madhupada again and again. So this particular mucus get diluted, and again it becomes 6.7 pH. It becomes a little bit acidic in nature. And again, what happens is that we are continually giving medicine, so the patient continues vomiting. And what happens is that the bile will be coming out, Pittandam Vamanam. When this bile comes out, it becomes alkaline in nature. It becomes alkaline in nature. So this is what we can observe while you do the measurement of pH on different vomiters in different stages of vomiting of vomana. And also there is a particular another test called Hay sulfur flower test. Hay sulfur flower test is that you sprinkle some sulfur powder on the top of you collect some vomiters, say 5 ml, and then you sprinkle some sulfur on top of it. If there is presence of bile salt in it, the sulfur sinks into the solution. This is actually done to find out the presence of bile salt in urine. So this was used in order to find the presence of bile salt in vomiters also. So Pittandam vomanam, you can use this as a test in order to find out what happens as an endpoint. For an endpoint clarity, you can use this. And another study which was done was that they assess the biochemical status of the vomiting. The biochemical status of the vomiting in the sense that they assess the mucopolysaccharides known as hexosamine, the glucose, and also the proteins in the vomiting, in the vomiters. So hexosamine is actually mucopolysaccharide, and it is actually the maximum part of mucus which is expelled while one vomit. So it was taken as a marker for the kapha while one vomits. So in people who are the females and also people who are having kapha prakriti, they had more amount of hexosamine in their vomit. So it was roughly correlated to that of kapha in the vomiters. So that was one of the studies which was being done. So and again, the physiological and biochemical changes in vomana, you can see that there is not much differences. There is not much differences while you do the vomana procedures. There will be an increase of body temperature. There will be an increase of pulse rate, an increase of BP. That is obviously that is expected while during vomana, and after vomana it comes back to normal. That is actually very normal procedure. And another interesting thing was that after vomana, the intestinal flora was assessed, and it was found that the concentration of E. coli before vomana ranged from 0 to 10 raised to 11, and after vomana, a mild shift in count was noticed as E. coli count decreased within limits. So actually, we can say that, or we interpret this that it promotes the microbiome. Microbiome is actually the amount of microbacteria which is present in our body, and it is actually helpful for us. This microbiome actually works in tandem with us, and they helps us in producing different vitamins and other nutrients which we cannot produce otherwise. So we need a certain amount of microorganisms in our body for our proper healthy functioning of the body. So actually this vomana procedures or procedures like Virechan and especially Basti also, the microorganisms, especially healthy microorganisms, they develop more, and unhealthy microorganisms are being reduced while you do different procedures like Shodhana procedures. Another important thing, this was actually a study done by Dr. Sachin Chandalia in IPGT, and actually I would like to just mention regarding this. He did a particular standardization procedure of vomana karma. So a concept of Manigi Shuddhi index. Manigi Shuddhi index in the sense that suppose a person who had taken 4960 ml of total input of medicines, including the milk and everything and all, and he vomited, and the amount of medicine which is remaining inside, while you minus the medicine which is being like you have the output, you have the input. Output is amount of vomiters which he has vomited, and input is amount of medicine which is given inside. So while you see the difference, there will be some amount of medicine or some amount of matter just left inside. That is the volume inside. That is 2780 ml. 2780 ml of medicine was inside the patient after giving 4960 ml of total amount of medicines. So another patient, 14800 ml of medicine was given for intake, and the amount of medicine which was staying inside the patient after full vomiting was 2250. So while you see both of them had almost 2000, around 2500, around 2500 ml of medicine inside them. So which one of them is having better vomiting? That is a particular question which we have. So this particular formula helps in finding out which patient will be having a better vomiting. So while you see the Manigi Shuddhi index, the first patient, while you put it in the formula 2780, that is the volume inside divided by volume input, which is 4960. into 100, it is 56.04. The second patient, 2250 divided by 14800 into 100 is 15.20. So the Manegi-Shuddhi index is lesser for the second patient. So lesser the Manegi-Shuddhi index, it is a better. This much amount of medicine was given and only 2250 ml of medicine is inside. So he had better activity. He had done better Vamana procedures compared to that of the first patient. So this is a particular formula which people can use while they do the particular assessment of Vamana karma. And we also know regarding the Peyadikramam, Peya Viledhyakritam Kritam Yusham, like we know about it, but why is it being said? Like it is being said that it increases the Agni gradually. So while you see what happens while the pH is being changed in the stomach and in the intestines, pepsin activity is significantly diminished at pH 4 and irreversibly inactivated and denatured at a pH greater than 7. So there is a change of pH while you do the different procedures like Vamana and Virechana. So the digestive capacity is being decreased. So in order to bring back that normal secretion of the digestive enzymes, we're giving the patient a particular diet chart. And according to that, the diet is being planned and the Agni or digestive juices are being produced gradually, and the patient will be able to take a normal food after a stipulated period of time. And another important study was regarding the mode of action of different medicines. One of medicine like Madanaphala. Like while we speak about the mode of action, we know about the CTs at the chemoreceptor trigger zone. We know about gastric irritation, and we know about the Prabhav. So what exactly is being happening? This is actually a particular study in which in silico and in vitro study was being done. They identified certain phytochemicals. They identified certain phytochemicals in Madanaphala, and they try to find its stimulation, its connection with certain stimulators like receptors like 5-HT3 and NK1 receptors. So they found that this particular certain phytochemicals in Madanaphala was able to connect to this particular receptors. And in chemotherapy, what they do is that they use certain receptor antagonist. They use certain antagonist in order to this particular 5-HT3 and NK1 receptors are responsible for vomiting. So if you can suppress it, then there will be no vomiting. So in chemotherapy, one of the side effects is vomiting. People vomit a lot. So they found certain antagonist in order to suppress it. So that is what the modern people do. But in Ayurveda, what the Madanaphala, what they found was that certain chemicals were able to stimulate this particular receptors, and thereby it was possible to make the patient vomit. So it was done by a particular, it was not, this study was particularly done on computer and using softwares. That is called in silico medicine. In silico medicine and molecular docking. Molecular docking means you find certain phytochemicals in Madanaphala, and then you find which of the particular phytochemical can join with the particular receptors, say 5-HT3 or NK1 receptors, and this is being done electronically. You create a model of that. You create a model of the phytochemical in the computer, and you create a model of these receptors in the computer, and you see how it interacts. This is the method they used while this particular study was conducted, and it was found to be very highly successful in understanding how the Madanaphala stimulates certain receptors in order to produce vomiting or vomana. And another thing which we have to think is regarding reverse pharmacology. Reverse pharmacology means we do certain procedures. We do certain procedures like Vamana karma. We do certain procedures like Virechana karma. So we have certain clinical cue. We have certain clinical hint, and we must look after this clinical hint, and we must think in the reverse fashion, like this particular medicine is acting in this particular body. So why is it acting? What are the chemicals? What are the mechanism by which this particular medicine or this particular procedure acts? That is the way of reverse pharmacology. The normal pharmacology is that you find a particular medicine and then use it in a particular patient, and then you see the results. That is what they do in pharmacology. Reverse pharmacology, you already have a patient, you're already using a medicine, and you see how it acts. That is the reverse pharmacology method. So these are the different methods by which we should understand the mode of action of Panchakarma procedures. Then again, regarding Virechana karma, we don't have much information regarding the mode of action of Virechana karma. Actually, this was actually a study conducted to understand the Virechana Karma, effect of Virechana Karma on the human body, where people observed the serum potassium levels, serum chlorium, serum sodium, serum chloride levels. So it was found that there was some changes in the body, there was some changes in the electrolytes in the body, but it was all within normal limits. There was nothing which showed which was dangerous and all. So it is very safe procedure. That is what the conclusion of this authors was, that it is a very safe procedure. There is some changes in the sodium levels, or there is some changes in the potassium levels, but it is all within normal limits. That is what the finding was at. And that is all I could find regarding Virechana. Much research is not being done regarding Virechana. But while you see a medicine called Eranda Thaila, which is being used in Virechana. Eranda Thaila is used in Virechana, and we know that ricinoleic acid in this medicine, castor oil, when you consider ricinoleic acid is responsible for producing this Virechana effect, and it is known to have smooth muscle contractility. It increases the contractility of the intestines. It causes mucosal damage to the cells in the intestines. Little bit of mucosal damage it produces, and it increased the intestinal epithelial permeability. So maybe some matter or something is coming from the body into the intestinal lumen and it is expelled out. We don't know what it is, but this is one possibility. This is one possibility regarding Eranda Thaila. And while we speak about Trivirth, the interesting part is that Trivirth, it is having certain activities like it have a hepatoprotective action, it has anti-inflammatory action, it has ulcer protective action. So while you see Trivirth, it is Sukha Virechanam, it doesn't cause much problem on the body. It doesn't cause any hani, it doesn't cause any much trouble to the body compared to that of Eranda Thaila. So maybe while you consider this, because it has hepatoprotective, because it has anti-inflammatory, because it is ulcer protective action, so it should produce a Sukha Virechana effect on the body. So certain studies were there to show the anti-ulcer activity, anti-inflammatory activity of Virechana and all. So we'll just skip regarding that. The idea is this, that it produces Virechana action without causing much damage to the cells in the intestinal lining compared to that of Eranda Thaila. And regarding the Basti, one simple question while you do the Basti is that till how much region does the Basti reach? How much region till the Basti while you do the Basti karma, where does the Basti reach? There's one question which we have. Nabi Pradesham Kadi Parshakukshing Katwa Shakra Dosha Chain Vilodia, some Snehega. We know that sloka. We know that it reaches Nabi Pradesham Kadi Parshakukshing. Some say that it reaches up to the Grahini. But exactly what happens? So this is a particular study which was done. And it shows that this was actually a study, a comparative study. Like they did two group of people. In one group of people, they did the study with Vasti Podaga. In another group of people, they did the study with Enimacan. Enimacan is different from Vasti Podaga method. Vasti Podaga is the traditional method which we use, and Enimacan method is another different method by which you use a different can, and it is kept on a particular height on the wall, and you have a tube coming out of it, and it is inserted into the anal canal, and the medicine comes and enters anal canal. So that is a comparative study. Some people do like that. So that is a comparative study of Enimacan method as well as the Vasti Podaga method. So what they found was that the maximum perversion of medicine was seen with the traditional method. In traditional method, the medicine reached up to the ileocecal junction. That was a maximum part, and to the minimum area it reached till hepatic flexure. And while you do with the Vasti Podaga method, sometimes the Vasti reached till the ileocecal junction, and otherwise it was only till splenic flexure. So the maximum perversion, maximum extension of medicine in the intestinal lining was seen with the traditional Vasti Podaga method. And this was a study regarding Anuvasana Vasti. Till which region does Anuvasana Vasti reach? Here it is being shown that in Anuvasana Vasti, while you do it with the traditional method, it reaches up to the sigmoid colon, and while you do it with Vasti Podaga method, then the Enimacan method, it stays only in the rectum. This is one particular study which showed how much Anuvasana Vasti is being spread while you do it. And they also did a particular formula, a particular new formula was being done where they found out that while you do with the normal traditional method of application of Vasti, and while you do with a modified method, which is actually a Vasti Pudaka method, so we know that the best effects is being obtained with the Vasti Pudaka method. So while you do with the enema can method, what should be the pressure? What should be the pressure? How much pressure should be applied so as to get the same result as that of Vasti Pudaka method? So according to this formula, they found out that if we keep the height, of this enema can at a height of 79 meters height, then you can get the same effect of Vasti Pudaka method. So this is just a research curiosity out of which they did this. So obviously the classical method is more better while you do the Vasti application. Then regarding another question which comes to your mind is that while you do Vasti procedures, will the Vasti get absorbed, or what happens to the Vasti? Is it absorbed? It is not absorbed. That is one question which we have. So this was a study which was done to understand if there is any absorption of Vasti which is being happening while you do the Vasti procedures. This was an animal study, actually a pharmacological study, where Lekhana Vasti was being done to rats. Actually, two group of rat was there. In one rat, Lekhana Vasti was done with Praksheba, and another group, Lekhana Vasti was done without Praksheba. So you can see how the Vasti is being done in this particular slide. Actually, it is interesting one. You can do Vasti to rats, you can do Vasti to rats, you can do Virechana to rats, you can do Nasya to rats, but you cannot do Vamana to rats. That is one limitation which we have. So we can better understand how the different procedures, Panchakarma procedures act while you do it to animals. So Snehana, Svedana, etc. was done, and then Vasti was done to the rat, and the blood sample was collected, and it was assessed. So there was a particular change in HPLC chromatogram. HPLC is the blood of the rat was taken and it was analyzed, and it was found that a particular marker in the Vasti, gallic acid, it was present in the serum of the rats after administration of Vasti. And also, these are the different graphs which shows the absorption of gallic acid, this particular marker in the particular study. And so gallic acid and ellagic acid were used as markers, and it was found that some part of absorption was happening while you do procedures like Vasti. Okay, so another study was regarding biophysical parameters of Vasti. Acharya says that Vasti should be Nadi Ushnam, Nadi Shidam, Nadi Sandram, like that Acharya says. So what is the significance of that? So one particular Vasti, Amrita Padolak Shira Vasti, almost 300 samples of Amrita Padolak Shira Vasti was being assessed, and they assessed it for pH, temperature, specific gravity and all. So what the finding was, if the pH is less than 5.8 and temperature is greater than 39 degrees Celsius, led to anal irritation. And if the pH is greater than 6.1 and temperature is less than 32 degrees Celsius, resulted in flatulence. So it should be apt. The pH as well as the temperature should be apt. So that is one of the findings which we can find in this particular study. And coming to the stroke genetics, like people are doing different genome-wide association studies, like which genes are being associated with particular diseases like stroke. In stroke, different genes are being associated. So while you do Panchakarma procedures, what happens to this particular genes? Are there any genetic effects to Vasti? That is what a particular study was done. And it was, you can see this graph. You can see in this graph that this is a butterfly graph, actually, volcano graph. In this volcano graph, you can find the red dots as well as the black dots. So you can find that there are changes in the genetic level. This is a preliminary study, actually. So this preliminary study, it is being shown that there are changes which happens in the genetic level, even a genetic level while you do Vasti. This particular Vasti was done for Pakshagata patients, and it was found that in Pakshagata patients, while you do the Vasti, after the Vasti procedure, after completion of treatment schedule, there were changes happening at the genetic level. This is a particular interesting study, and which is very much interesting to the Ayurvedic people. Okay, again regarding the different mixing of the Vasti Dravyas, Acharya says Makshikam, Lavanam, Sneham, Kalkam, Kashayam, like the order of mixing is being explained. So this particular study was done in order to understand what happens while you keep on mixing the ingredients and then triturating it again and again and again. What happens to the size of the particles? So what I found was that finally 90% of the particles were of the size of 0.010 micrometers. The size of the particles reduced to a great amount, and the reduced amount of size of the particles helped in absorption of Bastidrev. That is what the finding was there. You can find the size of the different particles 5 minutes after trituration, 15 minutes after trituration, 25 minutes after trituration, 30 minutes. So as the amount of this particular study, where it shows the amount of particle, the size of the particle decreased while you keep on mixing it continuously, adding it adding ingredients one after the other. Okay, then coming to the Nasya part, there are not much studies available which shows the mode of action of Nasya medicines, but these are actually modern studies which they did for transnasal drug administration. They have different mechanisms to understand how a drug is being introduced into the nose, how they act. So different animal studies are being conducted to understand the mode of action of transnasal drug administration, and perhaps this is actually a research model which we can use in order to understand how our Nasya act. We know that the absorption of Nasya happens by the nerve stimulation. There will be trigeminal nerve stimulation. There will be absorption of transepithelium. Those things are there, but experimentally speaking, there are not much evidences to show that such things are happening actually while you do Nasya karma. So more research should be done regarding Nasya karmas. So always, I must say that we must think some new methods while we are trying to understand the mode of action of Panchakarma procedures. Theoretical explanation is always possible while you speak about the Panchakarma procedures, while you try to explain what is the action of Panchakarma procedures. Theoretical explanation is always possible, but there are lack of clear-cut evidences. Like people say that while you give Basti, such things may get absorbed. Now we have the evidences for that. People may say that there is stimulation of enteric nervous system. There were some studies done which shows that doing Basti does release some amount of neurotransmitters in living organisms, and so we must do more researches regarding to understand the proper understanding the proper functioning of the mode of action of different Shodhana procedures. And also we must critically study the science. We must critically study the science. We should not religiously study. We should not religiously study. We should critically study the science. That is what I have to say. And we must be convincing while we study. We should be convincing while we are explaining mode of action of different procedures to people other than Ayurvedic people, even to Ayurvedic people also. More research studies should be done, and transdisciplinary research. More different amount of people from different areas, from different sciences should collaborate together in order to understand procedures like Panchakarma procedures. So all these studies are a little bit complicated. All the studies which I had mentioned is complicated in nature, and I had tried to simplify it in a manner by which students, actually the seminar is for people who are fourth year, so I have tried to make it into a simplified manner. So hope that students could understand what I was trying to convey. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for calmly listening to my presentation, and I would like to thank Ramya madam for giving me this opportunity. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen, for a very elaborate presentation done in a very patient way. And I think for our final year students, this would definitely be a new experience because they are not as such aware of what exactly are the things happening in the name of research in the area of research as far as Panchakarma is concerned. And I'm sure the presented might definitely intrigue a lot of insights within our students. Now I open the session for discussions. So we hope our students ask some questions. You can either unmute yourself or ask, or you can just type the questions in the chat box. Meanwhile, I'm once again very happy to have our Vinod Kumar sir with us, who is actually HOD who was our HOD even to the Department of Panchakarma, retired professor. Vinod sir, if you could please comment on the presentation and your reviews in our research updates in the field of Panchakarma. We will be happy to hear from you, sir. Vinod sir.
I don't want to comment anything. It was an excellent presentation. What are happening in the research field in Ayurveda, and how we have to promote the research activities. For the students, it may be a little difficult to understand at this stage. Anyway, it is as Dr. Ramya said, they will be familiar with some of the activities. And I am very happy Dr. Praveen is the son of one of my best friend and my PG colleague, Dr. Shashidharan. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your inputs.
Thank you, Vinod sir. I think we also have Dr. Megha with us. Dr. Megha, who is a senior practitioner specialist in Panchakarma from Maharashtra. Dr. Megha, if you could like to add on something to the whole scenario. Dr. Megha Surwase. Dr. Megha. Meanwhile, Megha join us. We have a question from Dr. Dibya Jyoti Moharana, Dr. Praveen. He asks, he comments, it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. So one question is, could you please say practical application of Panchakarma on immune system? Any research idea you could suggest? Dr. Praveen.
Hello.
Yeah, Dr. Praveen, you heard the question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so regarding the Panchakarma for immune system, it is very effective actually. While doing my PhD also and while doing my post-graduation in Ayurveda College Trivandrum also, we had many patients who were having some immunological problems, and we did Panchakarma procedures for them. And the thing was that the patient was able to get relief clinically very much. But the thing regarding the research is that we should have more fund for that. The funding is one of the things which restricts research in Panchakarma, especially in immune system. Like what happens while you do Panchakarma procedures in immune system. Such things are being taught now only, like certain marker studies. Now I think one of my juniors are doing study in NASIA. While you do NASIA in cervical spondylosis, can you see any particular changes in the markers of immune system? There is one particular study which is being conducted now. I think it will be completed by 2 years. So maybe we'll be having an answer by 2 years. But as of now, we don't have any particular solid thing to say that this is what's happening while you do Panchakarma. This is a mode of action, what is happening while you do Panchakarma procedure in immune system.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Praveen. One more question is, could you please explain microdermation?
Yeah, microderma aberration, that is actually it is. Like microderma aberration is a particular method by which the topmost portion of the skin is being a little bit abrased. There's a little bit mechanical aberration is being done. Different methods are being used for microderma aberration. So especially in beauty treatments, I think they are doing this particular microderma aberration treatment by a particular layer, a thin layer of skin is being removed by different methods, and what happens is that new skin will be formed after that. So medically speaking, or while speaking in the terms of Panchakarma, what happens is that while you do procedures like Udvartana, while you're using dry powders Udvartana, maybe a small topmost portion of the skin is being removed, and that will facilitate more absorption of medicines, like while you do Abhyanga procedures and all. So that is what the concept which was trying to convey while you do microderma aberration, like Rukshana before Snehana. That was a concept which I was trying to convey. So I think, am I clear, or was that the question?
Dr. Suratna Banerjee was asking the question, and she had further asked, can we can the microderma aberration be correlated with Prachana procedure of Raktamokshana? I think she couldn't understand the whole thing. Can it be correlated with Prachana procedure of Raktamokshana? She's asking.
The microderma aberration is not exactly, it cannot be correlated with prachana. Like in modern medicine, modern people, what they do is that they use certain micro needles. Micro needles are used in order to produce minute holes in the skin. So that will facilitate the absorption of medicine. That is what they say. But while you do prachana, the amount of the injury which is happening to the skin cannot be compared to that of microderma aberration. That is actually different, actually a completely different aspect, I think.
Okay, Dr. Praveen. One more question from one of our students is in, I think she had, in the Vamana, the case of pH, you were mentioning the pH of vomitus was from moving from alkaline to acidic and then again to alkaline. Acidic to alkaline and then again to acidic. Is it possible to stop Vamana before Pittanta? Even when the vomitus, I think what she meant was, even when the vomitus has become acidic, even though objectively we did not find any Pittanta, can we stop it only by seeing pH? I think this is what she meant.
Yeah, okay, I got the question. Ideally, what I should say is that Pitta and the Vamanam should be done. The Pitta should be seen, but in certain rare cases where the patient cannot, or in some cases where it is not possible, you can take this as a criteria to assess the endpoint. But I would say that as a classical or as a reference point, Pitta Andam should be there.
Okay. Question from BG. Biophysical aspects of Vasti, can you explain it once more?
Biophysical aspects of Vasti. Yeah, biophysical aspect of Vasti, while speaking of the different action of Vasti, there was a study which was being conducted. It was conducted, I think, in Maharashtra, I think. I'm not sure about that. What they did was that they collected almost 300 samples of a particular Vasti, 300 samples of, I think it was Amrita Padolak Shira Vasti, and they looked out for parameters like pH, temperature, specific gravity of almost all the 300 samples. And this particular Vasti was given to different patients, and they observed what was happening to the patient. So the observation was that if the pH of the Vasti was less than 5.8 and temperature is greater than 39 degrees Celsius, it often led to anal irritation for patients. And if the pH is greater than 6.1 and temperature is less than 32 degrees Celsius, it led to the formation of flatulence. So what they were trying to say is that the range of pH should be such and such way. Temperature shouldn't be too much, like na di shidam, na di ushnam, na di santram, na di gadam. Like it increases specific gravity also, such things. So what they try to say is that they try to standardize a particular Vasti procedure, particular Vasti with like when you take Amrita Padolak Shira Vasti, this should be the pH, this should be the temperature, this should be a specific gravity, this is the range of specific gravity should be there. So what they try to say is that if there is any variation in this particular pH, if there is variation of temperature, if the temperature is more, it led to anal irritation. If the temperature is less, it led to flatulence. So this is what the study showed. Am I clear?
Yeah, I think you're clear, Doctor. Any more questions? I think we also have Dr. Ambali Krishna with us. Dr. Ambali Krishna, I think she's the most recent faculty to join Government Ayurveda College, Trivandrum as faculty. Dr. Ambali Krishna, would you like to comment or add on any of your informations into the presentation?
Good evening, all. Praveen, it was a very good presentation. Nothing more to add now. Ramya, thanks for the invitation also. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Ambali. So if there are no more questions, I think we will wind up today's sessions. I think with respect to the only the thing as far as our final year students are concerned, the message with the whole presentation, we are very sure that at this point you may not be understanding everything, but we need to understand these are all the things that are happening in and around us with respect to the Kriya Krama. You might have taken notice about the presentation, the paper that was published under Harvard Medical University that was showed by Dr. Praveen, initially dubious thing, something called as detoxification and all. But we could understand that the mode of action of every of our karma is beyond the physical or the biochemical parameters at present the modern science has explored. The tools that is required, I still remember the sentence that was told to me when I tried to analyze the mode of action of Snehapana during my PG studies. I think Dr. Vinod sir will be very much aware when I was discussing things with him. So finally, I landed up in Trivandrum Medical College to find out the methodology, how to find the mode of action of Snehapana. And so further, I got an answer from Dr. Shankar, who was the head of Department of Pathology there. And he told me, you have to understand our science is actually at micro level and your science is at nano level. That science which had already understood given Grita and Aristas and alcohol preparation that would cross blood-brain barrier, having a media effect. So the level of your science is at a nano level, and trying to understand a nano level thing using a micro level tool will not be justifying the nano level science to the 100%. So it's not key anything that in the research, the modern parameters, if we couldn't explain it in their way, it doesn't mean that our science or our mode of activity of our Kriya Krama is limited. It's because the tools available are not enough for that. So even though since we are living at this particular time in a contemporary society, we are supposed to be getting updated with all kind of modern technology or modern updates as far as we all think all our students must be equipped with that, but without losing the strong footage in our own science, our own principles, and our own possibilities of understanding human body in relation with the so-called the cosmos, that is Yat Pinde Tad Brahmande. And understanding such a level of intelligence basically gives us a freedom to analyze things to a great extent. So keeping that spirit in mind, definitely we need to go along in the field of research, especially with respect to Panchakarma. So towards the end, I think I call upon, we'll wind up the session, call upon our final year student, Liana, for the summary. Liana?
Yes, ma'am.
You're audible, Liana.
Okay. Good evening, all. Today's Karma Siddhi was about research update in Panchakarma. Dr. Praveen sir has given us such a valuable class on this topic. First of all, we got an idea about research in Ayurveda and different research methodologies. Nextly, understanding mode of action in Panchakarma was explained. Portable Shirodhara machine was introduced to us during the section. Nextly, another research such as healing robot for standardization of Shirodhara was explained. Its physical examination and other findings were also said. Nextly, transcranial drug delivery mechanism, which is experimented on rats, were also explained. Different studies on the Abhyanga Karma and the new possibilities were deeply explained. Nextly, research aspect in Udvartana Karma was said. Snehabana research was also deeply explained. Study of results in giving Snehabana was taken. Also said assessment of acne is important in research aspect. Nextly, hemodynamic effects of Sarvanga Svedana was explained by studying in two group of people. Blood flow distribution at rest and during heat stress happening in whole body were explained using picture. Nextly, different research observations on Vamana Karma was explained. In this topic, haze sulfur flower test and biochemical status vomiting were said. Physiological and biochemical changes were also said. Studies regarding mode of prabhava and gastric irritation was also said. Nextly, effect of Virejana Karma in serum electrolyte was said. Eranda Thaila and Trivrta studies were said. Pervasion of Asthabana and Anuvasanavasti in intestine were explained. On the basis of Bernoulli's theorem, new formula derivation was also said. Evaluation of pharmacology in Leghanavasti was done in rats and studies were explained. Modern study of transnasal drug administration was said. Lastly, Sir said that many research and theoretical explanation is always possible in Panchakarma. Dr. Praveen Sir has also reminded us that today is Charaka Jayanti during this valuable Karma Siddhi section. By this, I conclude the summary section. Thank you all.
Hello, Dr. Ramya.
Hello, Sajla. Hello, Sajla. You are audible, Sajla. I call
ma'am.
upon, Sajla for the vote of thanks. Yeah, I
Honorable
think, Sajla.
Organizing Committee, delegates, and my dear friends, good evening all. As we have come to the closure of 6th session Karma Siddhi 2020, it is my privilege to propose vote of thanks to all who have helped making this event such a result. First of all, I, on behalf of Ashtangam Ayurveda Vidyapeetham, extend a very hearty thanks to our resource person, Dr. Praveen, Assistant Professor, Department of Panchakarma, PNNM, Ayurveda College, Cherturthi. Thank you, sir, for your very interesting talk on research updates. We are extremely grateful to our Panchakarma department for providing such great opportunity. So I thank Vaidya Ramya ma'am, HOD, Department of Panchakarma, Ashtangam, and Vaidya Sri Parvati ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of Panchakarma, Ashtangam. Thank you, ma'am. I would also extend my gratitude to Vaidya Sri Priya ma'am, HOD of Samhita Department, Ashtangam. I thank Subhana, final year student Ashtangam, for reciting prayer for the session. I would also like to thank Nivedita, final year student Ashtangam, for giving the note. I thank Liana for summarizing the session. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all delegates and my dear friends for your keen participation, which made this event a great success. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sajla. So wishing all a very happy and innovative Charaka Jayanti. Charaka, who is considered as the incarnation of Adishesha. So today is Adishesha Jayanti also. Probably in Kerala we are not much aware, as I said earlier. Anyway, let us pray and think and pay all our tributes and reverences to Acharya Charaka, who was a multi-dimensional personality existing in theirs, and today, still today, we are thriving on the wisdom that he has passed on to us, and we must be blessed to have come across such legendary giants like Charaka and Susruta. So wishing you all a very happy day, and we'll be meeting again for our next Karma Siddhi series, the last from the outside faculty, on next Saturday. We'll be having the session on mode of action of Snehana and Snehapana as well by Dr. Srijan, Associate Professor, PNNM Ayurveda College, Cherturthi. So happy day to all of you. We end the session. And thank you, Dr. Sri Parvati, again for hosting the whole program, even though we had co-host as Amni with you. Thank you.
Thank you.